and Turkey appears to be heading for a second vote. What are the consequences of this election? Well, I'm joined by Galip Dalay, Associate Fellow specialising in Turkey at Chatham House. Good morning.
Good morning.
We're also joined by Nick Baird, who is the UK ambassador to Turkey from 2006 2009. Hi, Nick.
Hi there.
And Catherine Philp, the Times' Diplomatic Correspondent, joins as well. Hi, Catherine.
Hi, Matt.
Galip, let's start with you. How would you define Turkey's role, both geographically and sort of geopolitically, in a sort of a broker between Europe and the Middle East?
I think Turkey now represents, to some extent, a quite powerful trend in international affairs, which is basically engaging in geopolitical balancing act between Russia, China, and the West when it comes to great power competition. So the Turkey is one of them. The India, to some extent, is another country. The Brazil is one of them. So you have like quite many countries, that quite many significant powers in international affairs now engaging in a geopolitical balancing act between the West, Russia, and China. And I think Turkey very much exemplifies it. But Turkey has a unique characteristic because when you compare Turkey's action with all other actors' action, Turkey is a NATO member. So Turkey is not South Africa, Turkey is not Brazil, Turkey is not India, Turkey is a NATO member. So that makes this whole story even much more interesting. And just look at Turkey-Russian relationship. And historically speaking, yes, Turkey always tried to have very good relationship with Russia. Yes, Turkey always tried to have, economic, energy cooperation with Russia, even during the heyday of the Cold War era, even during the presidency or the prime minister of the pro-Western actors such as, Turgut Özal or Süleyman Demirel. But there are some novelties in the recent relation between President Erdogan and President Putin. One is that the fact that Turkey now buys the sophisticated weapon system from Russia, in the form of the S-400 system, while at the same time being a NATO member. That Turkey engages in significant geopolitical cooperation when it comes to regional conflict management mechanisms, be it in Syria, be it in Libya, be it in Nagorno-Karabakh. Now that you see that Turkey and Russia developing very closer ties when it comes to sensitive technologies, such as the nuclear power plant, which actually the both countries unveiled on the Turkey's first nuclear power plant on 27th of April. So in this respect, there are, when we say geopolitical balancing act, that comes across as a cliche because this is a term that you hear very often nowadays when it comes to while different regional actors are taking the position on the war in Ukraine particularly. But I think when we use this term, we have to define what it means. And I think in the context of Turkey, these are the three factors that make it unique and also so different from the geopolitical balancing act pursued by Brazil or India or South Africa.
Nick, let me bring you in on this. It was interesting listening to all those clips of world leaders welcoming Erdogan on the world stage. You met him several times when you were the ambassador. Have you been surprised by the direction of Turkey on his watch, actually more since you left Turkey in 2009? There's this drift, I suppose drift to suggest it wasn't deliberate, but move towards an autocracy. Have you been surprised by that?
So certainly in the period I was in Turkey, 2006, 2009, it's a very positive period. And Turkey was very much looked at as a sort of model for other, Muslim majority countries as a possible, democratic model, and a successful, prosperous democratic model. It is less that now. Clearly, we've seen a lot more restrictions on freedom of expression. We've seen a lot of arrests of the opposition and so on. I don't particularly see that, changing if Erdogan if Erdogan stays in power as looks likely. That said, nor would I see Turkey kind of becoming a Russia or a China. I think it's still at a stage where Erdogan is a shrewd judge of how far he can go in these areas without causing serious internal unrest that would be difficult for him to control, or indeed losing his foot in the Western camp, which is very important for him. I think Galip described it very well. I mean, Turkey wants to keep one foot in the Western camp, one foot in the Eastern camp, because that's what gives it power, demonstrating to each side that it can influence the other.
Catherine, I want to come into you just a moment. I want to revisit Turkey's particular role in British politics. It came up a lot during the 2016 Brexit referendum. And the question of whether or not Turkey was going to join the EU, and therefore Turkish citizens could then come to the UK under freedom of movement. This is Penny Mordaunt, Boris Johnson and Michael Gove during the referendum campaign.
I do not think that the EU is going to keep Turkey out. I think it is going to join.
As far as I know, last time I looked, the government wants to accelerate Turkish membership.
The evidence is that the British government and the European Union are actively working towards Turkey joining the European Union and Turkish citizens being able to travel throughout the EU.
So none of that came to pass in the end, Catherine. Turkey's not joined the EU and Britain isn't in it. Where would you put British-Turkish relations now?
Well, they weren't done any favors by some of that rhetoric in 2016, but I mean, I think realistically, there was a lot of spin put on the whole Turkey EU membership issue. I think that Britain is in a very similar situation to quite a lot of its Western allies, particularly in regard to the war in Ukraine and relations with Russia and with China over Turkey's role. So I think it's almost more important multilaterally now than bilateral British-Turkish relations. Obviously, as Galip said, Turkey is a NATO member and is acting as a bit of a spoiler at some stages in that, vetoing Sweden joining, and yet is continuing to play this unique role it has, where it's able to capitalize on Russia's isolation and its own foot in the Western camp to do things like, that are even useful to the West at the same time as everyone is frustrated by Erdogan's transactional mercurial behavior. He was able, for example, to get through a grain deal for Ukraine last year during the war that did manage to unblock the Black Sea ports for a while. So I think that Britain is very much treads as carefully as most Western allies do where Turkey is concerned.
Finally, maybe I'll ask you all the same question. There's been a lot of talk about has populism peaked? Are we going back to more straightforward, democratic, boring old politics? Lots of people were looking to Turkey as the next signal that was the case. If Erdogan does win, at the moment, the results coming in suggest that he might yet do. Does that signal that we still have something to worry about in regard to the rise of populism and autocracies? Let's start with you first of all, Galip.
I think, this formed the global narrative of this election. Not only this election, actually, in recent years, all the elections that we have seen in Brazil, in Hungary, etc., even in UK to some extent, was treated within the larger context of the populism versus democracy. And I think that has been very much the story of the election in Turkey. And the results suggest, actually, almost all the polls are getting the things wrong, because one thing that has miserably failed in this first round of the Turkish presidential election are the so-called respected polls, because almost all of the respected polling company, they failed miserably when it comes to predicting the results, because almost all of them predicted, or many of them, the one that was respected, predicted a lead for Kılıçdaroğlu, the opposition candidate, if not him winning in the first round outright. So I think that's the phenomena of populism, or the phenomena of the rise of the nationalism in politics, because this is the single most important factor in Turkish politics now. The nationalism, the different shade of it, because in the West, for quite some time, there was an infatuation or obsession with the conception of Islamism in Turkish politics.
Yeah.
But driving force of Turkish politics of the present day is not Islamism, it's a nationalism, the different manifestation of the nationalism, from the Euro-Asian leaning nationalism to more European-style far-right nationalism. And that is the single most potent force that is driving the Turkish politics now. And not only politics, the foreign as well. And I think we need to grasp what it means, not only in Turkish context, but in a larger international context, how the new shape of the nationalism is defining the politics. in the contemporary international system.
What do you think, Nick? Have we been reading this all wrong?
No, I don't. I don't think so. I mean, I put it slightly differently. I think what the Turkish situation demonstrates, which definitely is, afoot elsewhere in the world, is polarization. I mean, I think it is a highly polarized society and getting more so. And I think that is, worrying in terms of Turkey's future stability. I mean, what one hopes will happen after the election is there'll be a huge focus on, recovery after the earthquake, economic growth, and so on, and that could help the country come together. But at the moment, it feels very polarized.
Just finally, Catherine, how long do you think it would be before Rishi Sunak feels able to go and shake the hand, maybe even invite President Erdogan to the UK?
Well, I haven't seen any congratulatory messages yet, although it's a bit early.
Days.
The first one I spotted this morning was from Iran, which I think might tell you something about the future of democracy in Turkey. I think it's going to be important to see what Erdogan, if he does get through, if it goes to runoff and he gets through it again, what he does with the country and what he does with the power that he's also accumulated in parliament. Because remember, there wasn't a presidency in Turkey until he invented it. So I think that we've got to be aware that elections have a lot more, democracies are a lot to do with a lot more than just elections. So yeah, I think everyone around the world will be looking at what Erdogan does next.
Really fascinating. Really it's good to have your expertise on all of that. That was Catherine Philp, the Times Diplomatic Correspondent. We heard from Nick Baird, a former UK ambassador to Turkey, and Galip Dalay, Associate Fellow specialising in Turkey at Chatham House. We'll no doubt check in again with Hannah Lucinda Smith in the coming days in Istanbul as those results continue to come in. It's interesting that the number of overseas votes from Turkish expats seems to be slightly holding up the results as they come in with neither President Erdogan or his main rival, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, reaching the 50% mark. Right, you can listen back to that on the Red Box podcast, wherever you get your podcast from. You'll also get the columnist panel today, Libby Purvis and Rachel Sylvester. That'll be